Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about AI and machine learning, and we've been talking about specific use cases. And I certainly want to throw it up to the Jake and ask Nan, give us an example of a use case that the Jake has been able to implement that has been of the betterment of DoD or the community at large.
Sure. Actually, let me give you a couple more than one because we've been very busy. So the first one I'll talk about is, so we've got basically 6 verticals, 30 plus products across 6 verticals that we're building. So we've got use cases across the whole gamut there. The first one I'll highlight is business process transformation as a vertical, which actually our very own Rachel Martin actually ran before she went over to the NGA. So one of our absolute successes, product called Game Changer, which is really focused on think of policy and text documents and being able to build intelligence and reasoning on top of it. Got 2,000 plus users on the system, and it's actually multiplying like rabbits out there in terms of new clones of Game Changer being applied to different use cases. So just a phenomenal use case there. Joint information warfighting, basically, we used to call that the cybersecurity. We've got a product called Mad Hat that's been deployed really around network intrusion detection and working. We've got joint logistics. We've got a project Salus that we actually built in the early days with Northcom and the Guard around predictive capabilities in terms of resource shortages and other pieces there. We've got an augmented reality microscope that we've built in working with the Defense Health Agency around detection for 8 types of cell problems and diseases based off of the 55 million tissue samples that the Defense Health Agency actually has, one of the largest troves of data out there. And we're basically mining that information and data to enable that. Joint force protection, we have a project called Gargoyle that's focused on full motion video object detection at low altitude. I can keep on going, actually. The core point that I'd make here, though, is that the products that the Jake builds are really intended to be Pathfinder projects that develop core IP and force us to build things like data pipelines and infrastructure and things that we can then proliferate across the DoD. So our core goal is, once we've figured something out, like Game Changer is a great example, is to basically build that IP and give it away so it can get scaled out there. Because at the core point, I mean, as you've seen across this whole discussion, pretty much all of the base layers of problem sets are pretty much the same, right? The vendors that are on the call, I mean, are really providing us with all the great technology that we can leverage and build, but we have to go through the data processing and the other basic work to enable all these other pieces. So the products that we're building at the Jake are really intended as enabling us to build core IP. And over time, the Jake is really now turning its work towards, instead of doing product development, really enabling all the agencies to go do this themselves, right? Teaching them how to fish. And different ones are at different layers of maturity. I mean, Rachel's now gone off and she's got the NGA under great control. But then there are other agencies that we need either Jake alumni to go over or, to help them basically enable this stuff there.
It's really, I mean, you just blew me away when you were talking about AR for microscopes, and just to think about the capabilities here is absolutely phenomenal. Well, since you've called out Rachel a couple of times, Rachel, let's start with you. Top priority for this year, and love to see this cross-pollination of talent across the community, by the way.
Thanks for the kind shout out, Nan. I've definitely, I definitely was, indoctrinated well at the Jake, because our top priority for this year is really getting our data house in order. As we've worked through mission sprints, which is our prototyping efforts, and some of the other lines of effort that we have, what we've noticed is at the heart of every problem is usually some sort of data, something related to data. And so for us, it's not just a problem of data in-house. We also need to then be able to deliver that data to decision makers and to warfighters, and we have to do it quickly and accurately. And frequently we have to do it to very remote locations. And so our problem is somewhat complex in the way we manage and deliver data. So that's one of our top priorities for this year. And the other one is also this idea of taking these areas where we've identified challenges such as data, and building out an enterprise infrastructure that supports that. I think we've had a lot of great success with smaller projects, but taking those successes and being able to make them enterprise, deliver enterprise capabilities is another top focus, and that includes things like algorithm governance, all the way to enterprise data management practices. So those are our core focus areas for the coming year.
Hearing a lot about framework and ecosystem so that you can get up that value chain and stay there. So Neil, how about top priority for you in regards to machine learning and AI this year?
Yeah, no, thank you, Luke. Yes, definitely. I think the challenges we are facing is very similar to what everybody is talking on the panel here. I think someone mentioned about 35% of the project which are working on AI machine learning actually goes into production. So we are very similar to that. We are trying to change that model and trying to put some of these models into production. It's not easy, like people are mentioning the data challenges and ingest challenges, creating the model challenges. So what we are seeing is, as we have mentioned earlier, is we are creating what is a center of excellence for all of CBP for AI machine learning. And I think we are hoping there, how do we the challenges we have there is we're trying to figure out what do we buy off the shelf or what do we develop ourselves. As you know, skill sets within the industry is not easy to find good data scientists, and very quickly there's a lot of demand for them. So if we are like everybody else is struggling to get the right skill set. So I'm hoping that moving forward, we can actually produce more and more of these products, I would say, either working through the industry or also working internally within our own skill sets. And I'm hoping that moving forward, that from broader perspective, what we are responsible for is that we make the main goal for us is to make our life easy for our operators. That's the number one goal. So whatever tools we give them has to work, has to be secure, and things like that. So challenges for us, Luke, I would say moving forward is how do we take the data what we have, all the tools what we have, actually make it operational. That's the number one challenge we have right now.
Right, and that talent challenge is always, talent management, always a big deal in any of these advanced technologies. Gil, how about at VA? Top priority for you this year?
Right, great question. So in terms of priorities this year, we're really focusing on collecting and understanding the different use cases around artificial intelligence that are ongoing, collecting and analyzing those use cases so that we can apply trustworthy AI to ensure that these use cases that end up being leveraged are developed to meet these principles. There's also certain areas that we're looking at the National Artificial Intelligence Institute at the VA, focus areas such as deep learning, explainable AI, privacy preserving AI, as I mentioned, trustworthy AI, and finally, multi-scale AI analysis.
A lot of activity going on over at the VA, all good stuff. Nan, how about your number one priority at the Jake this year? Got a lot of stuff going on over there.
Yeah, so we've got a number of number one priorities.
Give us your top dog.
So just like Gil said, I think the Jake's now about 2 years old, and we're now at a point where we feel we've had enough Pathfinder projects across a multi-dimensional set of data types and use cases and things to understand generally what the scope of the problem is. Congress just recently tasked the Jake with a pretty big job to inventory, just like Gil pointed out over at the VA, is to inventory what's actually going on in AI across the DoD. So one of the things we're working on very hard is once we have this inventory, we now understand, we're going to apply basically an intelligence layer on top of it of who's where, in terms of the maturity of different services and agencies, where we need to focus our attention in terms of either assistance or getting out of the way in other cases. And then there's a second thing of, I have a very big bias on sort of a lot of the work going on in the AI world today is what I really call sort of focus on narrow AI problems, right? So these are all the building block foundational areas around specific use cases or specific data types. The real interesting stuff for us at the DoD, I believe, comes in the second and third wave of really things around like modeling and simulation, reasoning and intelligence, which is on another dimension, if you may. And that's where we're starting to do work around things like, commanders, COA generation, or things like targeting and other pieces there, which become a lot more complicated. They're built on the basic sort of narrow AI building blocks, but deploying things like AI to the tactical edge in a denied, degraded environment, right? You're dealing with UAVs, with hardware, you're dealing with very sophisticated algorithms crammed onto a very small system with battery packs and limited CPU and memory, the communications models, et cetera. So these are all bigger problems that we have to think through that are really going to deliver sort of that next gen of stuff after we're done with the basic AI pieces. That's another big area. So we have to sort of chew gum and walk at the same time of getting the stuff done that's easy, but then setting ourselves up for the sort of next gen use cases that is really where I think the real exciting stuff comes.
Yeah, it sounds like the Jake 2.0 is in full form there. All right, well, we're going to wrap it up with this last question and talk about kind of paint a picture of the future, if you will. I'm going to start with you, Sunil, over at Customs and Border Protection. Fast forward a couple of years, what does it look like out there in this environment? How do you see the use of AI and ML maturing inside of CBP to once again keep our country safe?
Absolutely, Luke. So what we're expecting is, I think the trend is moving very fast towards this model of AI machine learning. Every product you're looking at, every vendor we talk to, AI ML is the discussion point for everybody across the board. And so what we are seeing is that data in general is expected. The data, any format should be able to ingest, shouldn't matter. But the models we are expecting especially from the industry, is that they are providing us some common element and some of those AI machine learning models, which can be applicable to across the board, right? We should be able to take it one area within CBP and move it somewhere else, and so that everybody looking in the same with the same eye, right? I'm a traveler. I also can also be an importer also, right? How do we make sure that the same person is what we are looking at and what the person profile looks like across the board? Learn from that. Some of the data sets is what we are expecting, and the vendors have become extremely good now. We are seeing some of the companies we are working with, they are going toward this convergence of some of those data types, right? Earlier, if you have the buckets of data, you're doing transactional data, or you're doing non-structured data as to what that looks like, right? But now everything is combined together. It should not matter. We are creating these large delta lakes, and these lakes should be able to create the models for us. I'm hoping that becomes a norm more and more as we move forward. And our data strategy moving forward, CBP is also working towards that. So you will see some of those pieces. I'm hoping that, as I mentioned earlier, that we can take some of the data and make it more operational, help us for that perspective from the vendor community is what we are looking forward to.
Right. I love seeing this AI and ML capability sort of embedded in these partner solutions. John, you gave us some great examples of sort of what's going on out there and some of the capabilities that you're providing. What does it look like over the next couple of years? What are the customers signaling to you that we can expect to see in perhaps the next 2 years?
Well, there's a couple of issues that are happening all at the same time. There's the data provenance in AI that's really important. And yet at the same time, trying to make sure that you're sourcing the data from the right places so that you don't inject bias into the decision-making that a decisioning engine will make. And at the same time, you're trying to, if you will, delight your end user constituency, creating a greater degree of intimacy, approving a credit card transaction, routing the person to the right next session. You remember somebody, what do you know about them? What can you know about them? And pushing this back and forth from a core, with many petabytes of core data, taking and extracting that information and pushing it out to the edge to use it actionably in real time. And one just quick comment, in our personal lives, we don't compartmentalize the experience we get when I personally use the VA as a retired veteran, or when I'm doing an online banking transaction with my local bank. I don't care which vendor I'm dealing with or what service I get, but I expect them to be good. And this constant CI/CD thing, constant innovation and constant deployment is something that everyone is all about right now. And I think we're just pushing the beginning, I think. And I think the next 2 or 3 years is going to be really exciting.
I'm certainly excited about it. Nick, how about a Pure Storage? What are you seeing out there? You guys are doing a fantastic job laying down the technology, staying in front of the curve. What's it look like in a couple of years?
Well, we think what we see is that the rise of really data science and the focus on delivering outcomes is really changing how enterprises, every organization, federal government, commercial, et cetera, is really thinking about data. So what we're focusing on is this transition, or rather the rise in prominence of data management, data service integration, data as a service, and data infrastructure becoming a central pillar of AI-driven organizations, particularly with the rise of AI-driven organizations, because we're going to have to figure out strategies for implementing our data strategy and the mechanisms for doing that. So we're seeing a tremendous focus. What are the speed protocols, et cetera, underpinning all of its data, wherever and whenever and however they want to, at the edge, at the core, and at the velocities that emerging 5G technologies, as an example, are going to deliver to agencies and organizations. So that's our focus going forward, is really how do we build a better framework for data integration from top to bottom.
Right, and staying ahead of that curve, and we really appreciate everything you're doing there. Henry, how about at Cloudera? What's it look like over the next couple of years? What are you all going to provide as far as that ecosystem to allow these agencies to do what they do?
Yeah, it's interesting, the path ahead. We talk to a lot of different government customers and work with them in different parts of where their journey is and where that's going, right? We see some that we have to get core fundamentals down, right? Data preparation, data engineering, that has got to get, and they've got to start at that ground level to make sure that machine learning AI is ready. So that's on their near-term roadmap. And I think the next is, how do you productionalize machine learning AI? So we talk about, 35% are only making it to production, right? That's kind of like what Nan was saying, those building blocks, right? You got to get those fundamentals down, whether it's come from data engineering, data warehousing, the full data pipeline, right? How do you collect it? How do you deliver it? How do you make sure that it's ready to go? All of those things, I think that productionalizing, I think that's the core of the near-term future, is getting that piece together, that full data management side managed, so that you're prepared for it. And then I'm really excited what Nan said, that third wave, right? And that's the pieces that, we're here at Cloudera focusing on, is how do we start doing, streaming AI? How do we start operating at the edge? How do we start making better decisions and doing something that is much more forward leaning? And I'm really excited about that over the next few years.
Really fusing and hardening that environment. So again, we can get up that value chain and really focus on these higher order capabilities. Gil, how about over at Veterans Affairs? If I'm a freshly minted vet in a couple of years, or a 30-year vet, what does that look like to me in a couple of years from now? What do you guys got cooking over there?
Right. So I think, I think a lot of the things that were said by the people at other agencies, we're going to see a number of those, whether it be, faster service, for veterans, whether it be more cost-efficient service, also better quality service. I think we'll see this especially in business processes at first. And with time, more and more throughout medical care. So at the VA, there are medical facilities across the country. Some are in rural areas, and there are different places where working at the edge may be beneficial for AI to deploy, where either network connectivity or Other factors may play a role in transferring and transporting data and so forth. So there's a lot of those technologies can really make a difference in the upcoming years.
Fascinating. I'm sure everyone will look forward to that. Rachel, how about at NGA? What does it look like there in regards to a couple of years from now? What can we expect?
So NGA, of course, everyone knows is an intelligence community agency, but it's also a combat support agency. And NGA's vision for the future is encapsulated in what we call the director's moonshot. And that's simply stated, and there's some keywords here that are worth focusing on. In 2 to 5 years, we will deliver trusted GeoInt with speed, accuracy, and precision so that we can hold at risk forces our adversaries may deploy against us that threaten the United States and our allies. And that's within that broader, goal or vision for the future is 4 focused initiative areas that we will be looking at to achieve that moonshot. And they're assured position, navigation, timing, and targeting. What do you do if GPS doesn't work?
Mhm.
Accelerated tasking orchestration, data access and integrity, and analytic workflow modernization. Woven throughout all of these focus areas, of course, is an implicit understanding that AAA technologies, that AI, automation, augmentation, human machine teaming will be there to allow us to achieve in these areas. And so AAA, the office, our focus over the next 2 to 5 years will be doing everything we can to accelerate the adoption of these technologies so that we can achieve the director's moonshot.
Fantastic. And I would encourage everyone to go out there and take a look at the moonshot description there. It sounds fantastic, and really looking forward to seeing that completely realized. Nan, how about at the Jake? What can we expect in a couple of years? Are we going to have a Jake 3.0, a 4.0?
Well, I guess we got to keep the version numbers.
I couldn't resist.
Yeah, it's funny. I spent 25 plus years in Silicon Valley before coming to the DoD. So, government service in the DoD is relatively new to me. So fundamentally, there's sort of 2 big things I'll talk about. One is some of the things I talked about in terms of the second and third wave of AI, the way we're sort of thinking about where it's going to get deployed. Obviously, AI is going to be everywhere in a couple of years, right? So it'll be like the internet or mobile devices, et cetera. It's ubiquitous. But the big areas of focus for us to set the seeds for what's coming is there's sort of a hyper-local focus on AI that I call autonomy. So when we're thinking of the tactical edge, that's really the investments in IP that we're building to allow things like AI for small unit maneuvers, for things with SOCOM or JSOC or other things where you've got units on the ground in a tactical edge deployment. What are all the AI pieces that are needed, and systems needed to enable that? The other big thing going on at the DoD are projects like JADC2, right? Joint All Domain Command and Control. We're redoing literally end-to-end the entire command and control structure, all the way from Rachel's, intel inputs, all the way to targeting and basically a target, sensor to shooter type systems. So those are really where we're going to apply the sort of AI technology. Underpinning all this, what you find is we at the DoD, just like any other large enterprise out in the world, we have a huge amount of technical debt that we've accrued over the past 10 to 15 years. So our infrastructure model, and that includes data and other pieces, are unfortunately in a state that don't enable us to do rapid marginal cost development of software. So software in and of itself is a discipline, right? There are economics in terms of running software projects and how you deliver this at the right cost, at the right timing. And this discipline and understanding needs to be brought to bear because we operate at such scale. And so, for instance, today, I call this, I'm sort of well known in the DoD for talking about this, as sort of the snowflake architecture problem, right? So we've got hundreds and hundreds of little apps running around the DoD, but they're not integrated into platforms. And the stuff, for instance, that Rachel will be driving at the NGA, right, is GeoInt as a service. This model where we have all of these different services that are being delivered at scale right? With the right, security, with the right uptime, with the right performance and other things. So the average AI developer or developer inside the DoD can write an app without having to spend millions of dollars, right? So the marginal cost has to go down over time. We just don't have the infrastructure for it. So with the backdrop of sort of autonomy and automation, the two big things, there's this infrastructure refresh and data refresh change that we need to go through. And if we can achieve these in the next couple of years, for us, that's the entire competitive game, which obviously is now focused on China and other peer competitors who are going to be driving the same level of technological changes in their infrastructure there.
Well, you've certainly laid the gauntlet down for a very interesting and very exciting couple of years ahead. So appreciate everything that you're doing. I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules today to join us for this program. We know how super busy everybody is these days. I'd like to thank our sponsors for supporting us on this show. I'd like to thank the good people here at the Federal News Network that make our program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank the listening audience out there that are tuning in every month. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum, part of the Federal News Network.